I'm Shirley Pepys, and 5 years ago, this museum became a reality after a meeting with one of the past board members of the original Balboa Island Museum, which was located on South Bayfront. They came to me by some means to get my opinion. The good news is that my background in business and owning a company, which was no joke, and I did children's bedding and accessories. I set up many trade shows in the 30 years that I was in business, and all of that experience certainly translated into a museum. It was 25 years ago that I moved here with my husband, and then we briefly went to the peninsula, but it was the island that stole my heart. So we bought a home here, and that was 23 years ago. So I've been a resident for a long time, but I really wasn't involved because I still had a career and I drove in and out of my driveway. And I really didn't partake in all of the activities that were going on. Although out my window on South Bayfront, I would watch the beaks and all that went on that. And it was always fascinating to me. Well, as it turns out, that was the Balboa Island Yacht Club, and which was started, I believe, about 90 years ago by Mrs. Beak, the mother of Seymour, and her husband. And so it was fun to watch and get to know, well, now we are the home of all of their trophies, some being close to 90 years old, and all their memorabilia and also photographs. So there's an exhibit on our wall. The museum got its start in the year 2000 by a woman by the name of Pat Butteritz, and she had a vision to use the old firehouse as the museum, and I believe to acquire the property, and she was rounding up people that she might be investors and willing to help out. Well, the man who owned the fire station, old, by then we had a new one, was not interested. So the building sat empty for many years, which was really quite sad. He has finally leased it, but it's to a clothing store. And so she had the right vision, because somebody needed to capture what this wonderful community has to offer, and it's a lot of pleasant memories. It's just a lot of happy people that came here with their families when they were small children, and these people now that we interview are in their 80s and 90s, so it's quite fun. And so they leased a place finally then on South Bayfront, which I had mentioned, but it was a very rustic exhibits. They had some fencing, and they tacked the photos that they had on these old wooden fences. So it was clever. But anyway, so there was a party for the museum, and someone invited me, and that was I don't even know how many years ago. Say 10 years ago maybe. And so I said to them that I would be happy to get involved in the museum if they ever decided to move. Well, lo and behold, fast forward 5 years, and Sharon Lambert came to me and said, would you be willing to go to this cottage on Marine Avenue? I didn't know her. We would like to move the museum, and I would like your opinion on the facility. Actually, how they really knew that I don't even know. I guess it's kind of serendipitous or something, because we came. I liked the building a lot. It was only this building, not the front. And so Sharon and I began our work, and she went back to her then board, and they agreed on a new monthly rent that was considerably more than what they had at the present time. So she went door to door and got people to commit to donating some small amounts of money and I think it covered the first month's rent or something. But by then I was getting involved with her, and Sharon had great ideas, and I could execute them, I guess, is really what happened. And luckily I was in a place, my husband had just passed away, and so I was in need of a new passion, something to do in my extra time, I guess, that I had. And so it was obviously meant to be for me, and I think for the museum. And so we went to work, and you know, I started in with just kind of sketching out exhibits, and I had to learn very quickly. And then I was lucky enough to have an assistant, Ellen Goodman, who was my right-hand partner, maybe in crime, but we're partners. And so she helped. So I could come up with crazy ideas, and somehow she could put them into writing. And so little by little, it didn't look like it does now, but we had, you know, we had enough exhibits to make it interesting, and with the patio and the trees and flowers, and so it was an inviting place. When the museum opened 5 years ago, it will be 5 years in December. It was 5 years ago we signed the lease. So we only had 3 months to learn very quickly, especially for me, not having been a long-time resident then. I didn't grow up here, and I didn't grow up coming here. So in our open house, we started inviting people to become members. And through the members and donors, including myself, we could start putting more exhibits to work. We started doing oral interviews, and we started what we call the speaker series, which has been very successful. So if you're a member, then you are invited to our speaker series, and we have wine and desserts, and there's no charge for it. And we have done 7, and we're working on our 8th, which will be the history of the Newport Beach Police Department. We've already done the fire department. And it's full house. We can get about 100 people in our patio and in the museum, and it is pretty much sold out, even though we don't charge for admission. And so that's been very successful. And then 2 years ago, we started our historic home tour, which was our first fundraiser. And now we have committed to doing a 3rd. I'm kind of hoping that we sort of change it to the vintage home tour, because I think it allows for a little bit more fun than the historic. And so the membership has grown. So I think when the first year, you know, maybe we had 75 members, we now have 350. And we're hoping, and our goal is by next year to have 500, because we're going to do a much bigger campaign for membership. And we do that through our mailing of letters appealing to people, and we do it through the newsletter. We've printed newsletters. We've done a lot of marketing materials, maybe more than most small local museums have done. And so I think we've done a good job of branding. Maybe that's what I knew how to do, having done that in business, and I believe in it wholeheartedly. And it was only about 2 years ago that we had the opportunity to rent the cottage in front, which is now on the street, because for the very reason is for branding, because we were set back. That was made it a little bit more challenging. Well, now we've got the storefront, so we sell merchandise such as my silver Bevel Island charm, which is exclusive to us. But we have that street presence, and we have signage, and it's been great for our brand and for people, and we have been very lucky. We've worked hard at it, Ellen and I, to make sure that we get a lot of PR. And we do, most of it is local, Orange County local, and we're now ready to, you know, take more steps. So it was a big step for us to expand to the retail store and have the street presence, and now we are looking for a permanent home. And this takes us to an entirely different level in fundraising and planning and vision. So I had a meeting as recently as this morning to talk to one of the council members. So that is the next plan, and that's going to take a lot of effort and combined effort with the city of Newport Beach. Our museum is a cottage that was built in 1947 by the Pulaski family. There were two children at the time, brothers, and Raleigh Pulaski, who is an architect, is still alive and lives actually on the peninsula. He's done an oral interview with us, and I've interviewed him myself on a couple of occasions, and I love all of his stories. And he said the first two, so this room was the living room and a bedroom where we have our television, and then there was another bedroom where the doll collection is. With the kitchen obviously was the same. But in the front two buildings, the first one where our store is was a hair salon. And the other small building was a facility where people brought their laundry. And I don't know the date of the laundry building, but I know the year for the store, our store now, was built was 1926. And so it's very fun. But when I talked to Raleigh, one of my favorite stories is when it snowed here one year, and he was living here, and he and all his friends got their skis and sleds, and they started at the top at PCH, and they brought their sleds all the way down Marine Avenue. So he has some, he's in his 80s, so he has plenty of stories about just things that he did with his family and with his friends, and all the pranks that they did on the island. Many people are very impressed that for a very small historic museum, we've done a good job not only in our exhibits but also in telling the story. And we make sure that our docents, most of them, are able to share that story. So when I did get involved, I did not have the background, and so I had to learn quickly and interviewed people so that I could, and I was lucky because Seymour Beek, his father being Joe Beek, the founder basically of Balboa Island, along with Mr. Collins, who is behind me, they are the two that really put Balboa Island on the map. The first family that we are aware of is, I'm not sure it was a family, but it was Mr. Collins. And Mr. Collins was the first one who brought wood barged from the McFadden Pier so he could build the Collins Castle, which is what it was known to be, for his fourth wife. And then Collins Island is still at the end of Newport Beach, end of Balboa Island. And so, but it has its own name. We have Collins Island and Balboa Island and Little Balboa Island. He was very good at promoting real estate and sold it to many. You'd recognize their names, some of the movie stars and who used to frequent this whole area way back. And so we started with Collins was the first one when they brought that barge with wood to build what they call the Collins Castle, which is featured here. And he did that, I believe, for his fourth wife, one of his wives. And he didn't stay there forever, although he was quite a promoter as well as Joe Beek, both of them, in trying then to sell real estate, because this is just a sandbar, so it was created with bringing in lots of sand and building it up. And the thing about Balboa Island, which is so unique, is they realized at an early time that not everybody should have the ability to enjoy this beach, unlike the other islands in Newport. So I don't know if they donated it or if it was from the city or exactly how it came about, but it was their vision to have a sidewalk, which is now boardwalk, all around the island. So people from all over get to enjoy our beaches, the water sports, the views, homes. So it's quite unique like that. So out of the islands in Newport Beach, we stand out that way, and we're referred to as the jewel of Newport Beach, which I like because, you know, all our streets are named after jewels, and it was a family on Balboa Island that were the ones that their family, I think the children, helped name the streets, which the majority are named after jewels. And they did a lot of interesting promotions, which one was, we recently found out, was they would bring in girls from Los Angeles, because the majority of lots were sold to people from Los Angeles and Pasadena. And that's where the red car came into being. So there was a train that came from LA and Pasadena to the pavilion on the peninsula. But in the meantime, some of the promotions might be they hired girls, and where we see this famous photo of all the bathing beauties lined up, we recently found out that was really a promotion done, we think, by Mr. Collins, who would help sell lots by having this entertainment. And I guess the local women weren't too interested in doing this. So that was one of their promotions. There were many. And then there was a time when, which I believe was like around 1916, where everyone realized that the plumbing and all of the infrastructure of the island was not up to par. And so that was when I think they were annexed into the city of Newport Beach. Another one of our important families on Balboa Island are the Beeks. And Joe Beek, Mr. Beek, who is the father of Seymour, who is still living, is the one who started many of the programs, especially all of the sailing. He was very big into sailing. And he also was the one that made Balboa Island itself more accessible to a lot of people, even through the development of the streets and signs and boardwalk. His son Seymour is the one now who operates the Balboa Island Ferry, which was started by his dad with, I think, pretty much a rowboat. And they would go back and forth, and then you see the pictures evolve over time, and then it goes from a little barge, and there's one car, and it's being towed. The ferry that we see today it's vintage would be a good name for it. It's hasn't changed, which in a way is very, very nice. And the Beek family still owns that ferry, and there are 3 of them. We have multiple photos, including in the Beek family exhibits, about just their story and how important they were, and they still are today. Seymour Beek is very generous with his time to tell the stories, and he remembers everything about his father and his mother, and it was actually his mother and father who founded the Balboa Island Yacht Club, just by wanting to help 6 little boys learn to sail. From there it went into a very unique program that's a yacht club run by children for children. So the Commodore would be 17 or 18 years old. Very unique. I don't think there's anything like it actually in the country. And that exhibit is here. Their trophies are here. And that took a few years, but we have them now, and everybody agrees this is a great place for them. One of the most unique features of Balboa Island is the ferry service that we have between Balboa Island and the peninsula, Balboa. The ferry originally in 1909 was started by Mr. Collins. I think it was quite irregular, and I don't know that it would be anything that resembled today. And then the Beek family took over, and that I think they won in a little, almost like a contest as to who could get the ferry service. And so it grew, obviously, from one car and actually at one time one Christmas tree, and they'd parade it around the harbor. And so at some point there was one car on the barge, and there was another boat that was in front hauling the barge. And doesn't look anything like our 3-car ferries today, although they're not exactly what you would call modern. But part of that charm is the vintage. Nothing has changed in many, many years, and the Beek family still owns it. And I'm sure it will stay in their family for a very long time. From the Beek's story, then we went on to learn about the Hersheys and the Hershey family. The sister and brother, Anton and Susan, are still living in Hawaii, however, but they own the house here. Their mother died recently, and when she passed away, they decided that they would share their photo albums, which were absolutely beautiful, put together. The story was so well, and she actually got to come and see the museum before she passed. And so after, they even had her memorial service here. But we learned about how important the Hershey family was, and in the beginning days, because now, which still stands, is the building, and they still own it, the Hershey's Market building, which is on the corner of Park and Marine. And they through that, not only did they have a market for food, but then they built the building across the street, and they had a beer garden, and they had a nursery, and then, which became what we know now is Village Inn, but had many names leading up to that. And so, and Mr. Hershey would dress up as Santa Claus and give all the kids gifts, and she was a prominent figure on the island and doing great things for the residents. So their heart was here for sure. And so we are now talking to them about, future plans and more exhibits and more stories from those exhibits. One of the most popular events that we have at the museum, and we started very early on, so I think we have a reputation right now for making it a quality program, is what we call the speaker series. So we've done things where we were honoring the fire department, the early fire department, as where the next one will be for the police department, which seems like good timing, I believe. And we've done events from people and just their memories of people that have been here a long time. We have panels, so it makes it kind of fun, where we had John Scudder, who comes from the Scudder peanut butter chips family. He's lived here for a very long time, and we had him tell his story along with 2 others, Amelia, the restaurant, Amelia's, which just closed recently and now is going to be rebuilt. But her son also spoke about all the memories of Amelia's and what he remembers growing up here and all the fun that he had, but all the entertainers that his mother fed during her time. The way we do our speaker series is that we come up with a theme to begin with, and we do a lot of promotion to our members to get them interested. We usually do them from 7 to 9, in our patio, because that's the only place we can seat 100 people. And so we start with wine and desserts at 7. And usually before 8 o'clock, then we have our speaker, which is anywhere from 45 to 50 minutes. And then no one leaves at 9 o'clock, but they're still here. And then they come back into the museum and they want to talk to whomever the guests were that were doing the speaking, and to look at all the pictures, and they all have a story to tell of their own. So, and the majority of people that attend are Balboa Island residents. There's a few exceptions, but we've had the mayors here, present, future, a lot of the council people. Keith Curry was literally who is a councilman now, is the first visitor to the museum on the day that it opened, December 11th in 2011. A part of our mission for the museum is not only to share the history of the island, but also for a place where the community gathers. And I think we fulfill that with our speaker series, because that group has now become almost like a family, because on most of our speakers, the guests are pretty much the same people that love. They bring guests, but I think when you're giving them a lovely glass of wine and desserts, and there is no admission charge. First of all, I think it's just a nice thing to do for our members. And it's a party atmosphere. Beside learning about something new in the community, we did one that was called Postcards from Paradise. That was very fun, and all of the postcards that I think one of them said on the back of the postcard, and it was from Balboa Island, "I love you 1,000 times." Our membership is obviously open to people all over, for sure Orange County, but even beyond that, because we have a lot of people that grew up here and still like to come back and visit. So we have members such as those right now, and we encourage new people, because the things that we're doing, the invites go out to the membership. And so we invite more people to be a part of that. And if we have to have our speaker series for 2 nights, then we'll do that in order to accommodate more people. We actually have a new opportunity right now that for our members, we will also be able to utilize some of the Newport Beach Public Library to do speakers events where we need a larger venue. So that's something new that hopefully will happen in 2017. One of the most important programs that we have through our museum is what we call the oral histories. And we started those with 2 students from Cal State Fullerton who used this as a part of their internship and their graduation for their degree in oral histories. We have now expanded that. We have done close to 40 oral history interviews. Some are very casual through the Beeks and the Smith families, where we have done a much more extensive story on their lives. But so many of the people that serve as docents here have done their stories, and they all smile when they talk about Over the Bridge, which is our name for the oral history program. And they talk about very strange stories when they got over the bridge, and the things they feel, and all of the memories they had. And many came here because a lot of these people in their 80s, even some 90s, where they came here as children. So they loved telling their story about their dream was to be able to live here, which is what they're doing now. And as I mentioned, many are docents for the museum. And that is how our museum is run, is by volunteer with the exception of one employee. I think one of the probably most entertaining oral interview we have done is with Wing Lam, who with his brother is the owner of Wahoo's Fish Tacos. They still own the property. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lee, own the property where the present Chinese restaurant is today. They don't manage the restaurant, but they do own the property, and Mr. and Mrs. Lee actually have lived on Balboa Island for 30 years. It will, I'm sure, always be my favorite and most entertaining because Mr. Lee tells the story about when they had the restaurant for many, many years, and people would call, many days in advance to get a reservation because they had heard the story about when people would come in, most notably John Wayne, Mr. Lee would come out and sing a happy birthday opera song to him. So that word, even without social media, got around quickly, and it became a very famous place for birthdays. And so Wing Lam was very, very helpful in getting his parents here because they really don't speak English, but we do have his father breaking out into an opera on our latest interview, and he's very cute. There's no lack of personality in this Wing Lam family, and so Wing Lam is actually offered to help us as we are growing our museum and to introduce us to even more people. And the most unique thing for them is they were really a very unique family because they were one of two in Orange County for many years when his parents came. Our plans for the future and exhibits, aside from being in a hopefully larger museum and a larger space, is that we continue to capture, even if we can't exhibit the story right now, that we have the story about the individuals, our families, and their memories to be able to exhibit in the future. I'm still amazed after 5 years at how important the stories are of the stars that visited here. In mentioning John Wayne, he had his boat here, the Wild Goose, and which is now part of a charter series. But the people that are interested and that will come to hear about the person, their era, their movies. In fact, Newport Beach just designated John Wayne's birthday, May 26th, as a local holiday in our county. Same with Shirley Temple. She came here as a child, and in fact, it's just ironic that she and Buddy Ebsen performed together. And I mean, people will buy the prints. They're so interested in where was his house, where was her house, where's John Wayne's boat. The memory goes on. Now, at some point, I'm sure these children being born today will say, who is John Wayne? But not so far. The stories continue, and as I said, we have photographs of all of these, and especially Buddy Ebsen was a longtime resident of Newport Beach on South Bayfront. That house is just being ready to be torn down now, but we were lucky enough to have an event there last November. He always invited to everyone to, y'all come back. When I got involved with the museum in the beginning, there was very little funding. However, we did have, as I recall, a $10,000 grant from the city, And luckily, we've been able to raise that all, not enough, but they now give us 20,000, and this year I believe that we will get more, and we are trying to maybe look at them as a public-private partnership going forward with our new plans for a permanent home. In the meantime, the museum has been funded by some generous residents, and the three that have really kept the museum on track financially would be Don Abrams, Jack Northrop, and myself. And then we've had other either foundations or local residents who have also been very generous with their, John Scudder, for instance, has been very generous with his commitments for the last 5 years. So that beside our membership, we couldn't survive on just our membership. I don't think any museum can. There have to be either corporate donors or individuals. And so I think we've been very lucky that we are where we are today. We've been able to finance our growth, and now, of course, looking for the next step. We're very fortunate that we've had visitors from around the world. We have luckily kept a fairly good registrar of all the people that have been guests, and in many cases we've built our lists from that so that we can tell our story even better. The feedback from the museum has been pretty phenomenal. We have people from all over the world that visit here, and they have the ability, obviously, to visit very large museums, which we're not in that same class. But for small museums, the majority of people have said they've never seen one as well done as this, and because a lot of them around the community, small communities, have a tendency to look. They look historic. We're hoping our museum does not look historic, but just our memorabilia and our photographs. I guess if there's a reward in doing this, and all of the time and treasure that I've spent on the museum, it's when I read the comments from people in a guest book, or we have an event and people come up to me either at the event or randomly on the street, and they just can't say enough about how appreciative they are that I was able to spearhead the museum to keep these memories alive. I feel very blessed that at a time in my life when I had some free time, that I got involved and had this opportunity in the museum. Because for me, beside being interested in where I live, it's a creative outlet. And that was something that was always a big part of my life, having been in business, in a creative business. With my company Nojo, and then even a store on Balboa Island called Teddy Bears and Teacups that many people still remember. And I think it's been more than donating my time. It's a passion, and it still exists. I hope when people come to the museum that they walk away with knowing that this is a very special place. The history goes back a long way. One of the things that I like to do is we have guest books from day one and comments. And when you read the comments that people make about having been here, it's extremely positive, and talking about how it's the best little museum they've been to. So obviously those are things that keep us going, and we talk often about how do we keep that experience by the visitor interested, and they want to learn more about the island. Our latest exhibit is called It's All About the River, and that was done by one of our researchers, Celeste, well, two of our researchers, Celeste Dinnerline and Heidi Palmer. And we had actually an event to incorporate that. So it's done more in story form, and it's on our wall here. And it tells how, from the Santa Ana River, how we came to be. And it's all here in story form, so hopefully people can read this and know that we didn't just begin with a little plot of sand. It was very much thought through, and everything started really with the McFadden Pier in Newport Beach. So I invite all of you to come and see what we're all about. And I think you'll realize that there's more than just vintage photographs here. There's interesting story that makes us the bigger part of Orange County. And also we have added, as we mentioned, our retail store. So we have a lot of old photographs that we sell, as well as our exclusive Babel Island charms. And I think that you'll find a lot of things that will bring back memories, or you will learn about history that was here. And right now we have a very small but collection of vintage bathing suits and beachwear, including boots that were worn on the beach by the women. Okay. On behalf of myself, president, and of the board of directors of the museum, I invite all of you to visit, all of our political figures and our residents, and the broader Newport Beach community, so you can learn more about the place you live.